Let's be real. Manga is currently dominating in the West, and the sales show it. Go to your local Barnes & Noble and see how little shelf space comics have versus the manga and light novel section. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point it's completely taken over. But why? Why is manga doing so well? One reason is that manga has captured the interest of young fans and readers who are not only partaking in these stories through books that they can read in print and digital, but also watching the anime shows that are then adapted from the source material. It's a perfect ecosystem that unfortunately comics haven't yet figured out. And you would think that with the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there would be this connection, but unfortunately, this hasn't happened. So what are things comics can do in order to gain new readers? Because let's face it, they desperately need new readers, especially Marvel and DC. Today, I've brought on Adam Lawson to talk about the 3 things that he believes could help comics. He is a writer of comics including graphic novels like The Eighth, The Kill Journal, and his latest book, Kids and Monsters, which you can find on Indiegogo currently. He has also written for Warner Brothers, Netflix, and YouTube Red. And while we discuss this topic, like always, I'll be drawing a page from my manga, The Girl with the Megafists. So Adam, you think that there's 3 problems with Western books like, Marvel, DC, and Image, and IDW and whatnot, and that it comes down to 3 key issues. Number 1, venue. Number 2, content. Number 3, packaging. Let's start with the venue. Let's start with number 1, venue.
Right. So I've been tracking this for a while. Right. When I'm here, I live here in Burbank, California. So I'm at the heart of DC. DC Comics is here. 1 block from my house is a 7-foot bronze statue by Jim Lee of Batman. It sits in front of my movie theater. I couldn't be more in the heart of DC Comics, right? I'm here. I'm in the mecca of it. And so when I go into my comic book store, I don't see one teenager. And even though the guy who runs it is a cool guy, it's got great content, they're good about getting you your books. When I go into Barnes and Nobles, and there's 2 within a mile of me, right? And I go to the manga section, it is packed. Teenagers. It is the busiest section in Barnes and Noble, and I've been taking photos of it. Tyler, I've been building like a video, like a diary of this. I'm like, every time I go in there, take a photo, and you just see like 14 kids packed in there, and you're like, I don't see 14 teenagers anywhere in Burbank except at the roller rink, and I have 14 of them crammed into this manga section, and it's not just like, and it's not just teenage white dudes. It's girls, it's boys, it's every mix of people in there. You know what I mean? This is like the whole slice of life sitting right in front of you. And so it's like, what's happening? You're like, and clearly the sales show the same thing. It's a dying art. Marvel and DC to combine sell less than manga, right? Like, and so like you get these odd feelings like that. Oh, Marvel and DC are the institutions when really they're not actually. They lost, right?
Yeah.
They've already lost. TV has already lost to YouTube. The fight's over, right? And it's the same thing, I believe, in comic books. Like manga already won because they have the kids. So in 20 years, there will be no win. It's lost. And so, but what I feel like, speaking of the venue, one thing about it is that comic book shops are uninviting to new readers. Think about it. The Avengers movie drops. It's more successful than Avatar, and Avengers comic book sales don't go up. Think about this. You've done an advertisement that you spent $400 million on. It makes $3 billion in the box office. Hundreds of millions of people see it, and your sales don't dramatically go up. So you have a venue that's totally alienating. Imagine if you went into a comic shop, and at the heart of it was a boba stand, right? So it's serving boba. There's couches. There's manga and graphic novels. Forget the floppies. Their sales are already. The writing's on the wall, right? It's just the old guys who want it. Kids don't want a 22-page floppy. They don't even know what to...
For $5.
For $5. They don't even know what to do with that, right? Whereas at $10, you get this 150 to 200-page manga, right? That's like this bite-sized package. So imagine that was your comic book shop, and it was people hanging out and talking, and there was a food element combined into it, and there was an arena that was like, wow, this is the place where I go to discover the thing that's not on TV, right? Like that's what's cool about manga is when you're in there, you're getting, as a kid, you hear them talking about it. They're like, ooh, have you seen this one yet? Oh, have you read this one yet? There's like this fervor about it, right? That is electrifying.
All right, so number 2, let's talk about the content.
So content is the other thing about it. One thing that also is we have with Western comics, and I mean by Western, and I'm going to broaden it out with Marvel, DC, and Netflix's world, right? Because what's essentially has happened is why, if you can literally every week of the year see a new episode of a Marvel TV show, a new movie, play a new video game, you don't have any room in your life to read for what, right? Like you don't even have any room for it. It's so oversaturated with these core characters, right? So the idea of discovery is gone, right? Whereas, what I think is so special about the content of manga is it's not traditional. It's not just legacy characters. Now, obviously, My Hero Academia, One Piece, these are legacy characters, right?
Yeah,
they're
big franchises.
Huge franchises that have sold millions and millions and millions of copies. And granted, there's some staples in there, but it's not like when you go to Marvel and DC, it's still the same characters from the 60s now, right? You know what I mean? It's kind of embarrassing, right? It's like people are squatting on the cultural stage. Right?
Yeah. It's Spider-Man. What's he doing? Same thing he was doing 40 years ago.
It's just it's the same thing telling the same jokes. Whereas it's like, I know you've been talking about Chainsaw Man, and it's like, I just read recently Chainsaw Man, and it's like you read those 8 volumes, you get this ride that's like nothing else, right? Yeah. and so you get this crazy cool ride, and then it's over. And then it's like, oh, dude, yeah. Did you ever get into Berserk? And you're like, you dive in. And it's really amazing. And they do long runs. I mean, Demon Slayer has a 23 volume run. Don't get me wrong, they run long. But what's happening is they're cycling through these stories, and there's new characters and worlds to bring up, right? And as a result, there's still a chase.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's still like that feeling. Back in the day, remember when music wasn't on Spotify, and you could actually discover something in a venue. You could like go to a club and be like, no one's ever heard this band before, and it's like this new thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that anymore. It's all on Spotify, so everybody knows it all at the same time. But you know what I mean, Ty? Remember that? And so like when you're there in manga, you can be like, oh, dude, have you read this one yet?
I guess that kind of brings us to your number 3 thing, which was the packaging of these books.
Yeah. Right, and see, I feel like the packaging is a third piece of it, right? And it's like we talked about earlier, like the floppy, what you do is webcomics, and webcomics are awesome because they're a nice like shot in the arm, right? You can read them at work, you can read them while you're waiting, you can catch them on your phone, like with webtoons if you're a fan of that, and you can catch a quick hit of a story, right? And I think that's just really nice in a digital world. But when you sit down and you've got a printed thing, and you sit down and you're reading this, you're going to read 132 pages, right? You're going to take a real journey. And so if that experience is meaningful, I think it's very meaningful. And so the floppy idea, I don't, and what else too, where are you going to put all these floppies? They're kind of a mess.
In long boxes.
In long white boxes that you can't even display correctly, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like, at least with manga, you get this 8.5, 8.5 by, by 5.5 or 7.5 by 5, depending on which series, and you can stick them on your shelf, right? They can line up and stack. They can be presented, and also too, when you grab it, you're picking up 140 to 200 pages, right? And so you've got a meal, right? It's worth sitting down and reading for, hanging out at the park, sitting on a couch in a coffee shop to read, right? It's there. It's enough. Because of the bite-sized packaging, it's crazy because it's not even in color. The crazy thing is they're selling 100 million more issues not in color.
I know, and people and people are like, oh well, like the comics have to be. I won't read a comic unless it's in color. It's like, well, there's a million other people who are loving it.
It's just fine, and it's one of the ways it also makes them affordable to create, and also for the artists themselves, it minimizes the amount of skill set, right? You don't have to be a line artist and a colorist and a writer. That's like, that's pretty tough. Because of this packaging, and the black and white works. Now granted, I think it could work in color too. But the thing about it is they're selling 100 million more copies, and people are reading right to left. They're reading the opposite direction. Right? Like, it's inconvenient. It's in black and white, and they read the wrong direction, and they're still excited about it because I believe they've built a package that you want to hold on to, right? Like, that's why with my graphic novels, like, I tried to build a package that was like, that's something worth owning, right? Because we live in a world, especially now, where it's like everything is so digital and so disposable. Owning something really has to be meaningful, right? And so I just don't think floppies. In fact, I talked to my buddies in Europe in the comic book space, and they're like, because they don't do floppies.
They don't do floppies there.
No, they don't do floppies. And in France, 1 in 3 books sold in France is a graphic novel. They read more than we do in the U.S. for sure. And they're like, I don't even understand what is this floppy thing. And they're reading them by the pound. And they do the big 8, they do a large oversized format, beautiful big pages. They do color. And I think until we get out of that floppy, we switch the content up so that the comic books aren't about these like brands, as you said. I think you hit it right there on the head, Tyler. And at this point, they've become brands, so they've lost any sense of authenticity.
Yes.
And until we build venues where it's cool to hang out, and I can't imagine that Western comics won't just continue to decrease from the mainstream standpoint. The DC Marvel image side won't just continue to just shrink and shrink and shrink, and manga and other indie platforms to just continue to grow.
And before we end the show, I'd love for you to learn about Adam's latest book, Kids and Monsters, which I'll be backing on Indiegogo, and you should too.
So I've got a new graphic novel coming out. It's called Kids and Monsters, and it's a tale about teenagers who get pulled into an ancient war between monsters and beasts that reflects their parents' looming divorce going on at home. And they find these backpacks, and inside these backpacks live monsters. And these monsters help them fight this war, kind of like genies lives in lamps, monsters live in backpacks. And there's 2 worlds, the world within and the world we all know, and they're about to be ripped apart. And these kids, with the help of these monsters, are trying to prevent the world from being torn in half, much like their family, which is about to be torn in half. So like most of my stories, the heart of the story is kids struggling with the trauma of their parents' looming divorce, and a supernatural setting being this war between monsters and these giant red beasts.
Can I ask you one more question? Why did you go? Why did you? Because like Kill Journal was pretty brutal. Why is your next one with kids?
Well, I feel like that at the heart of what I like to tell is stories about vulnerable people, right? And kids are quite vulnerable. I have 27 nieces and nephews, if you can imagine, and I now have a new child. And there is a love of children and what their stories are, and there are many of those inside of me. And I wanted to build a tale that could work for all ages, right? And but has themes that are pretty dramatic.
Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much to my patrons who help make these videos possible, as well as make it possible for me to make my own manga. If you want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to know what you thought of this episode, so leave a comment in the comment section, and you have a great day. Peace.